So I can put some photovoltaics behind me now.
Expert. You are the expert.
And best of all, these are thin film photovoltaics.
But you need to put a wind turbine for me. One wind turbine.
These are, and for you and me, these are all clean modules, no soiling. So, hey, can I try to see? Oh,
Wait, can you hear me now, Larry? Can you hear me?
yes, but you have a lot of echo.
Can you, is it better?
So I cannot, for some reason, I was muted. And for some reason, I cannot share my screen. It says host disabled participant screen sharing. So I think the host has to allow me to do this. Ah, the host has allowed me now. I think that this is the one. So Darwish, do you see my screen? Yes, he says. And I heard you on here, Gory, but there was a lot of echo for some reason. So I'll stop sharing my screen now because someone else will take over.
Can you hear me? Dali ko tayo, mga kapatid.
So I see a lot of participants and I see Professor Darwish on, and I see Professor Guri Datta, at least is on the screen. And I hear or see no one else. I don't think I see or hear anyone else. I'm very impressed. I see that Professor Darwish is sitting in the Darwish Library, wherever he is. Has a huge investment in old digital technology, where you used your fingers in order to look at the books. And Gori, all we can see from you is your name. See, I got an email here from Professor Berra, and let's see what it says. It just says that I'm unmuted now, so. I don't know if Professor Darwish is talking. Oh, no, he says we can hear you. So maybe while we're waiting to get going, I should say that I visited the university maybe about 10 years ago on this and gave a talk and had a very good time then. And I'm sure things have changed considerably since then on this. So now we see Guri Datta on there with headphones and with video, but still muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good. I've been trying for ever so long. And it's good to see Professor Darwish also, and you too. And where are you? You're in Brazil itself still, no? You are in the site, on the site.
Yeah, we truly have an international seminar here, right? We have
Yeah.
Darwish from the UK. We have all of India on here, and we have one North American American here giving his talk from Brazil, from South
Yes,
America.
that's true.
So,
So that's good. Very
Okay,
nice.
shall we start, sir?
Shall we
Okay,
start?
good afternoon and a very warm welcome to all of you. Reliable and affordable energy essential for meeting basic human needs. Meeting human needs and fueling economic growth. But many of the most difficult and dangerous environmental problems at every level of economic development arise from the harvesting, transport, processing, and conversion of energy. I take an opportunity to welcome our esteemed keynote speaker, Professor Lawrence L. Kasmersky, our most dynamic and energetic principal, Professor Rajiv Agrawal, talented Vice Principal, Professor Kamal Kumar Gupta, humble and dedicated IQAC Coordinator, Dr. Aditya Saxena, firm determined DBT Star College Scheme Coordinator, Dr. Indrakant Kumar Singh, helping personality, Convener Physics Society, Dr. Pankaj Singh, and all respected faculty members who have joined this webinar in spite of their classes and busy schedule. I also welcome faculty members of other colleges of the university, researchers, and our ever enthusiastic students on this auspicious occasion of online international lecture series on recent advances in physics. It's my pleasure to welcome our eminent guest, Professor Lawrence, Fellow with the Renewable and Sustainable Energy Institute, RASEI, University of Colorado, USA, former Executive Director, Science and Technology Partnerships at NREL, and Emeritus Research Staff Members of the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, Golden, Colorado, USA. There is no greater joy than to share what you love with those who appreciate it. I thank Professor Lawrence that he graced us to share his great knowledge and enhance our mental rights with his wonderful talks. At the onset, I congratulate him personally for choosing such a wonderful topic, that is photovoltaic technologies, history, status, and opportunities for today's webinar. It is of high relevance in today's scenario. In these times when non-renewable resources of energy are exhausting and causing lots many problems regarding health, economic, and environmental problems, a small step toward the renewable and sustainable energy would prove a strong milestone for human mankind. This lecture series will be a great platform for the researchers and students from all over the world to understand the recent work going in the field of physics intact and share their innovative ideas with the renowned speakers. It is a wonderful opportunity for our students to know about photovoltaic technologies, its fundamental and applications by Professor Lawrence. We can say that an intelligent use of science and technology is basically the tool with which we can achieve a new direction. So I believe that we all are going to be benefited by this talk. Going along, I would like to invite our respected Vice Principal Sir, Professor Kamal Kumar Gupta, to speak a few inspiring words. Over to you, sir.
Yeah. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Ruchika. Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes,
It's
sir.
my proud privilege, in fact, to welcome today's keynote speaker, Professor Lawrence, University of Colorado, who will be speaking on the renewable source of energy. I welcome our principal, Professor Rajiv Agarwal, always dynamic, inspiring, and motivating force for academics and extra-academic activities. I welcome all the participants of our college and all other colleges, faculty, DBT Star College Coordinator, Dr. Indrakant, IQAC Coordinator, Dr. Aditya. I have my appreciation to the Physics Department for their efforts and idea of international talk series where they've called the world-renowned physicist for a talk series. It's really a privilege to see today Professor Lawrence will be speaking on the renewable energy. With the advent of civilization, human civilization, the need of energy increase in the geometric ratio. If I see the need of energy in last 10, 15 years, right now it is manifold. And probably the non-renewable sources are limited. So that is not the answer to meet the need of mankind. And the only answer is renewable source. I remember Dr. Gauri from our physics department. She has worked a lot on the solar energy. And I could see Gauri was suddenly going to great talk, and it's really wanted to hear you. Thank you. Ruchika, over to you.
Thank you, sir, for sharing your words of wisdom with all of us. Now, without wasting much time, I would like to invite one of our respected, experienced, senior retired faculty member, Department of Physics, Deshbandhu College, who worked with Professor Lawrence for long, Dr. Gauri Datta ma'am, who can share her experiences regarding Professor Lawrence. Along with him, she worked a lot. So, ma'am, I would like to invite you for sharing your experiences with us. Over to you, ma'am. Gauri Datta ma'am. Ma'am, I have unmuted you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Ruchika. Principal, Professor Rajiv Agarwal. Vice Principal, Professor Kamal Gupta. Teacher in charge of Physics Department, Dr. Kakoli Behra. Fellow colleagues, friends and students. Whenever we talk of photovoltaics, that is conversion of solar energy into electricity, the first name that comes to mind is that of Professor Larry Kasmersky. He is a pioneer in this field. I will give you very little biodata and just I'll share one or two words or one or two sentences about how I know him and his wonderful qualities. So Kakoli will be introducing him in details later. Now he is a pioneer of this field, as I said, and after his PhD and postdoc, he worked as an associate professor in University of Maine. And there he developed many thin film solar cells, mainly the first copper indium diselenide solar cell. In the early 70s, Solar Energy Research Institute was started in 1977. And he was the first research staff member in photovoltaics, hired specifically to establish research efforts in leading measurements and characterization of photovoltaic materials and devices. And he led Nrel in his efforts for the next 20 years in this field. Now, SERI became the National Renewable Energy Lab in 1991, and he was the founding director of NCPV, National Center for Photovoltaics. Research interests will be told more by Kakoli, but just very briefly, he works on materials by design. Then he rebuilt the electricity infrastructure using PV in Iraq, which was a decentralized project. A lot of things had been destroyed in the world. So I remember that I saw a photograph of him in a tank going to Iraq and attending to the photovoltaics there. So I think that was very brave of him during the war-torn region and wartime time. Then the problems of dust, how to mitigate them, he worked on that too. And let me tell you, as we are Indians, he has had a very long association with India. And he has served as the co-director of the US-India Joint Clean Energy Research and Development Center, or CERIUS. Other than that, he comes regularly to India as a distinguished visiting professor at IIT Bombay. And we have had the privilege of having a talk in our college before also, where he was present a few years ago and gave a wonderful talk on photovoltaics. And currently, he is involved with PV reliability in Brazil. And I think he will be telling you more about that. Now, let me tell you that Professor Kasmersky is a dedicated worker who believed in solar energy could be the energy of tomorrow, when there were very few believers or takers back in the 70s. He has been advocating and promoting solar energy everywhere since these early years. His enthusiasm for this is infectious, and his mesmerizing lectures got him many followers, including me. He knows how to get his message across. Many people can't do that. With whom he, and therefore, he also establishes a rapport with all the audience that he is facing. I have been working in the field of solar energy for 40 years now, over 40 years. And I remember I first heard his lecture in Iraq, in Baghdad in 1988. And I was totally impressed by this. It has been my privilege to have interacted and worked with Dr. Larry Kasmersky at various levels. Every time I have been overwhelmed by his energy, his brilliance, his hard work, his range of work, attention to detail, and mainly his vision. He knew what was coming tomorrow. And that is what is important. And then other than the scientific temperament of his, which we all know, he possesses a humility and a humanity which is endearing. Now, this is very rare in a person who has held so many top positions in PV, so many patents, written books, published over 350 papers, and won so many awards and accolades. Now we know that solar energy is being used worldwide. There is so much interest in it. But we have to thank people like Larry Kasmersky, whose life has been dedicated for making this dream come true. Thank you very much. And now over to Ruchika again. Thank you.
Thank you, Gauri ma'am, for your great words. It's a time to invite our soft-spoken, hard-working teacher in charge, Department of Physics, Dr. Kakuli Bera ma'am, to introduce our eminent speaker, Professor Lawrence, and begin the most awaited event of the day. Over to you, ma'am. Kakuli ma'am.
Hello.
Hello, ma'am.
Yes.
Yeah.
Am I audible?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Ruchika. Thank you, Kamal sir. Thank you, Professor Larry Kasmersky, for accepting our invitation. Thank you, Gauri ma'am. Good afternoon to all of you. I, Dr. Kakuli Bera, on behalf of Physics Department, Deshbandhu College, University of Delhi, welcome our Principal Sir, Professor Rajiv Agarwal, Vice Principal Sir, Professor Kamal Kumar Gupta, Distinguished Speaker, Professor Larry Kasmersky, IQSC Coordinator, Dr. Aditya Saxena, DBT Star College Scheme Coordinator, Dr. Indrakant Singh, Physics Society Convener, Dr. Pankaj Singh, all faculty members of University of Delhi and from all other universities, all research scholars, all participants, and all students of undergraduate and postgraduate courses in this international lecture series on recent advances in physics. Today is the 5th day of the lecture series, and the topic is Photovoltaic Technologies, History, Status, and Opportunities by Professor Larry Kasmersky. It's my great pleasure to give brief introduction of Professor Larry Kasmersky. Larry Kasmersky is currently fellow with the Renewable and Sustainable Energy Institute, University of Colorado, Boulder. He is emeritus research staff member of the National Renewable Energy Laboratory, Golden, Colorado, having last served as an executive director, Science and Technology Partnerships at Nrel during 2009 to 2013. Kasmersky's 50-year professional career in solar energy includes serving as the founding director of the National Center for Photovoltaics for the period 1999 to 2008 and establishing and leading the measurements and characterization programs during 1977 to 1999. He received his Bachelor of Science, Master of Science, and PhD in Electrical Engineering, all from the University of Notre Dame. He served a postdoctoral position with the Atomic Energy Commission at the Notre Dame Radiation Research Laboratory from January to August 1971. He was on the Electrical Engineering faculty, associate professor at the University of Maine before coming to the Solar Energy Research Institute in 1977. His research at Maine included NSF and ERGA funded work in thin film photovoltaics and report of the first thin film copper indium diselenide solar cell. He was CERI's first staff member in photovoltaics, hired specially to establish research efforts in characterization of photovoltaic materials and devices. He led Nrel efforts in measurements and characterization for more than 20 years. Kasmersky has more than 350 publications and some 200 invited talks. He holds 4 patents for instrument development. His research interest includes DOE Office of Science Energy Frontiers Research Center at Nrel, dealing with materials by design, for which he served as the project integrator, and solar projects ranging from the rebuilding of the electricity infrastructure during PV in Iraq through mitigation dust problems for PV collectors. He served as the co-director of the US-India Joint Clean Energy Research and Development Center, Solar Energy Research Institute for India and US. Currently, he is involved with PV reliability R&D supported by the government of Brazil, especially dealing with soiling issues and mitigation with various PV technologies. At Colorado Boulder, he serves as a PI program integrator for the CU DOE era SEPA research program on Perovskite material and solar cells. He is a part of CU Materials by Design group. He has been recognized with several national and international awards, including the World PV Prize and IEEE William Archery Award, AVS Petermark Memorial Award, ASES Charles Greeley Abbott Award, and ISES Christopher A. Wicks Award. In 2019, he received the ISES Farrington Daniels Award for his contributions to advancing solar energy research, development, and technology. In 2022, he is serving as a Fulbright Scholar in Brazil with the research on PV reliability and product integrity. He is a fellow of the IEEE, fellow of the APS, fellow of the AWS, and fellow of ASES. Kasmersky is a visiting professor energy at the Pontifícia Universidade Católica de Minas Gerais, Brazil, and is the Gandhi Distinguished Visiting Professor of Electrical Engineering with the Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, working with their PV programs. Kasmersky is a distinguished faculty of the Stromstad Academy, Sweden. In 2017, Kasmersky was appointed as a distinguished lecturer for IEEE Electron Devices Society. Kasmersky is a member of US National Academy of Engineering. In November 2018, he was elected as a foreign member of the Indian Academy of Engineering. Now, it's my great honor to welcome Professor Larry Kasmersky to enlighten us on the topic photovoltaic technologies, history, status, and opportunities. I'm sure that this talk will definitely increase our students' interest in this fascinating area of physics. Over to Professor Larry, sir.
Oh, Dr. Bera, I really want to thank you for this opportunity to speak, and I apologize in getting answers back to you on everything. I've been very busy here in Brazil, and I should say something about what I'm doing. I'm here in a Fulbright scholar program, looking at reliability, and this relates to India. Actually, I had the opportunity in India to work on several of the all India surveys of photovoltaics, and what we are doing here now is kind of a small representation of what was done in the series of all India surveys, looking at the reliability issue, and also to ensure the quality of the product that's coming in is high enough. And I kind of laugh after I hear this introduction, and I can see even my own evolution in photovoltaics, where I started working on with photovoltaic materials, looking at these things using microscopies and looking at the basic physics. And my whole career now has evolved, where now I am looking at huge systems out there that are gigawatt scale that we never dreamed of, okay, at the beginning of my career, that would take place so quickly on this. And so you have to realize that when I get students out there, yes, photovoltaics is a real technology producing real energy now. It's established itself, but there are incredible opportunities in all of these renewable technologies, because I'm going to make reference to what may happen by the middle of the century that all of the students here have the opportunity to be part of, and that's to go through increasing the renewable energy percentage of what our energy culture is, and also, okay, maybe look at photovoltaics and what it's going to happen, what's going to happen to it as part of our electricity structure, especially. So I'll deal with some of that, and I realize that I don't, but what I'm going to do is send Professor Berra, okay, a copy of this talk, and she is free to distribute it to whomever she wants. I think that's probably a good thing, because some of the subjects I am going to skip over. And I also like to say hello to all the other participants here, especially to the Dr. Singh and to Dr. Rajiv and to Dr. Joshi and Professor Gupta. And I always like when someone introduces me, they always avoid, except this time for Professor Berra, they always avoid the name Kasmersky. And then I look at these Indian names, especially these names with Chatavedia and all these things. And I can never understand why they have to have a problem with the name Kasmersky. It's so easy, okay, in this. So, and before I begin, I'm going to say one other thing is that Guri Datta, who I have heard speak many times, okay, about the programs at your university, okay, and also programs in India, and also talking about the contributions over the many years to the culture of the world that India has made, okay, going back to bringing us the zero and all the things from astronomy and astrology and all these sort of things, but also pointed out something very, very big to me, that I can now report from Brazil, that this city where I am now based, Belo Horizonte, has come to the point where its culture has come up and now has 4 Indian restaurants. And for me, as a person who has eaten now in 91 Indian restaurants in 91 cities of the world, I feel that Brazil has really come forth by welcoming real Indian food into its culture. So thank you very much. The screen and get into this. And my lecture is going to span actually what I have lived in photovoltaics. I started off in the, actually in grade school. I still remember some of the things I'm going to show at the very, very beginning, and saw this evolution coming through the 1970s, 1980s, 1990s, all the way to the point now where photovoltaics is a real part of our energy technology worldwide. But as I say, it's not over yet. So let me start off here with kind of is that where did all this solar PV start? And if I look out there, I can see that what I'm going to start into now, okay, very few of us, very few of you, maybe only me, was around at this time. Also, I want to also stress one thing is that for Professor Darwish, I did not go into Iraq in a tank. Okay, so that was a whole other part of the operation. I went in with photovoltaics completely. Anyway, so let me go ahead and see where this really started, and I hope that this works. So the real beginning, we go back into middle 1950s when Bell Telephone Laboratories, the US telephone company at the time, okay, came out and they had this project to develop an energy source for telephone repeaters in the southeastern part of the United States. And they had many groups working on different things, but the group that won out was this group that worked on photovoltaics. And many of these people in this group came out of the work on developing the transistor. Okay, it's a semiconductor technology. The first one's really based here on silicon. And this appeared in the New York Times. Okay, it says a solar of its kind, which converts useful amounts of the sun's radiation directly and efficiently into electricity, has been constructed here by Bell Telephone Laboratories. It may mark the beginning of a new era, leading to eventually to the realization of one of mankind's most cherished dreams, the harnessing of the almost limitless energy of the sun for the uses of civilization. This very flowery writing at the New York Times at the time really has come about. I mean, this is 1954 to 9, some 60 some years ago, okay, on this whole thing, that we really have a technology that is doing this. And I remember at this time, I was in the 4th or 5th grade in elementary school. And I remember our teacher coming in and telling us during our science class about this discovery of a solar battery that she thought, okay, that would become a big thing in our future. So looking back at my 4th grade teacher, okay, I have to say that she also had some vision on this and what would happen in the future. Oops. So these are the inventors, okay, at the time from Bell Labs: Gerald Pearson, Calvin Fuller, and Daryl Chapin. I got to meet 2 of these individuals. Career at Nrel on this, and let me let them themselves introduce themselves on what they were doing. And this is a video clip taken from the 25th anniversary. Remember that the solar cell came out in 1954, the modern solar cell, and 25 years later, Bell Telephone Labs released this video.
Man has long dreamed of harnessing the energy of the sun. In the 20th century, scientists turned their energy toward creating electricity directly from the sun. On February 5, 1957, the United States Patent Office issued a patent for direct. The recipients were 3 scientists of Bell Laboratories: Daryl Chapin, Calvin Fuller, and Gerald Pearson. Today, solar cells are used to power satellites, but in the 1950s, that wasn't the case. Was remote small amounts of power. We had thoughts about a satellite then because no one had ever heard about a satellite at those days. We were going to have some small power, low power transistor circuits, and that it didn't make very much sense to use the large generators that had been used in the past. A 10-ton truck out for a pound of butter. We knew we had to have a large collecting surface, which was very thin. And the idea was to get this in a fashion that would be permanent, would stand up for a long, long time. And work together to get that effect.
So I hope you note one thing here is that this team was made up of a physicist, okay, who was the team lead, a chemist, okay, who provided a lot of the information about the materials, and an electrical engineer who provided the support for doing measurements. So students out there especially, note that much research is carried out in this fashion, where you gather these different disciplines together in order to be successful. And in fact, this was incredible that Bell Labs initiated the project in 1953. And by November 1954, they were deploying photovoltaic modules shown up here, okay, at these sites on this. And these modules were about 30 to 35 watts in size, okay? And if you look at these things, okay, a 35 watt module would probably be the equivalent of maybe 6 of these solar cells. So an incredibly fast from discovery, okay, to deployment should be noted for technology. Something we're doing much better now today on many things. So Bell had a concern with consumer buy-in, all right? They never liked to put a product out there, whether it was the transistor or even the telephone or anything, because they thought unless the consumer understood what this technology was, they wouldn't accept it. They wouldn't buy into it. So they put out a series of movies at the time on this for people to understand, okay, what the technology is. Were produced and put out on television to serve everything from children, okay, all the way up through adults. And let me show you one that shows a portion of how they explain how a solar cell was made and how it works. And please note that this was produced by Frank Capra, who later won an Academy Award, not for this, but for other movies.
The simplicity of this sunshine wafer is startling. One big one for old Glory Puss, Doc.
I'd be delighted.
Well, get him. Old pastry cook research.
The recipe for this solar wafer sounds just like a vacation, just sand and sunshine. Kernel sand is composed of silicon and oxygen. Its semi-goto reading name is silicon dioxide. Separate out the oxygen and the bits of seaweed, bottle tops, and other odds and ends, and we have left a metal, silicon. But our silicon must be pure silicon. So we purify it until it's as pure as the driven snow. Now melt the silicon and add just a pinch of arsenic for flavor. Mix thoroughly and cool until it crystallizes. Then from the arsenic flavored silicon roll, slice off a razor thin wafer. Fill oven with a boron gas and bake to white heat. The boron cooks into the surface, forms an extremely thin icing over the wafer. Remove finished wafer. Connect one wire from electric motor to boron icing and the other wire to the wafer itself. Expose wafer to sunlight. Presto! The motor starts running with the efficiency of an automobile, and nothing is used up but the sunshine, which is free.
It is interesting to me, two things from this early video is one, that essentially a solar cell is made the same way now, a silicon solar cell with some great refinements on improving its performance, its efficiency, and its lifetime. And second, those lab procedures that are put in this cartoon version are recommended at all for any laboratory in the world. But Bell did get the message across on this technology, how it's made, making it sound simple, and in fact, giving the message that this was the future. Okay, and so we have the change and shift toward science and technology at this time. And you know, in the 1950s, okay, a big event occurred, okay, by the Soviet Union, and that was the launch of the first artificial satellite, Sputnik, on this whole thing. And it really was quite an incredible event in the world. It actually, and for instance, in the United States and the UK and in Europe, it scared a lot of people into science and technology. It really was a turning point that brought a lot of people careers into this because of this advancement in space. Sometime after that, the US launched not its first satellite, but its first solar powered satellite, Vanguard 1, okay, on March 17th, 1958. And this one heralded a whole new epoch, okay, of power. Because after that, the satellite was up there putting out this beep, beep, beep in space. Who were in charge of this project were naval research laboratories. And they had no use for the solar cells, quite frankly. Their power source was a battery that sat inside the solar cell. But they let these photovoltaic scientists put these solar cells, which were manufactured by a place called Hoffman Electronics at the time. And Hoffman Electronics had several people who came from Bell Telephone Laboratories in order to provide this first manufacturing facility. Well, the people who launched this satellite did not think the solar cells would work, would certainly not survive a launch into space or be long-lived. And so they made the transmitter. So for the next about 7 years, it put out this signal. And in fact, Vanguard was such a well-designed satellite from the point of view of orbit that it's still up there, okay, in space. And you can still track Vanguard on this website up there. It's the oldest piece of space debris. Everything before it had come back into the atmosphere, but it's still going around, and it should last for at least another century or two up there in orbit. But the big thing is this showed first of all, it showed that solar energy worked in the form of photovoltaics, okay, to power longer than the batteries did at the time. And secondly, it showed that this thing could last for a long time, that the power had some dependability. And now, of course, this also introduced the first solar markets after that. From Vanguard on up, we have all these photovoltaics. And in fact, every near-Earth satellite now is powered by photovoltaics up there. There's something like 6,500 satellites in orbit today, 3,300 it says here that are still active, okay, doing everything from providing the information transfer from your cell phones and televisions, all the way through spying on other countries, if you will. So from military down to consumers for these. And in fact, most of the Mars rovers, okay, have been powered by photovoltaics. The most recent one is powered by a radiation source, okay, a nuclear related source because it is so huge. But everything before that on Mars for the rovers, InSight and so on were powered by photovoltaics. Okay, and in 1958, when Vanguard was launched, this satellite that provided the first indication of solar power from space, for space, the annual production of less than 50 watts a year. In 1 year, this Hoffman Electronics put out about 50 watts of photovoltaics. And now we have progressed to times that we have multi-gigawatt factories, thousands of megawatt factories, single factories putting out this product. And we have factories in India producing modules there that are certainly approaching these sizes. So now I can finally get into the lecture. Okay, on this whole thing, I'm going to talk about the history a little bit that I have already, say something about the progress, which I think is important, stress that innovation is the foundation for all these technologies and will continue to be, and what some future expectations might be for photovoltaics. And as I said, stressing innovation in solar technology on this, and without innovation, we still have a long ways to go, even though it's here for many applications already. There's huge careers coming up for all of these renewable technologies if we are advancing toward 100% renewable energy future. And I'll just say that Professor Bera, when I get close to being taking up too much time, just tell me, because I'm trying to watch my watch and try to cut this so that I finish okay in half an hour or so, or 20 minutes on this whole thing. So where are we with photovoltaic technologies? Okay, when did modern PV start? We said something about that. And what are the innovation needs in order to make big impacts? And what should we expect for solar and PV growth in the near term, in the next 5 years, 10 years in our energy economy? And I show here the sun on this whole thing. And what has happened is people became very, very worried with COVID-19 coming on. Lots of predictions came up about this, is that, here we have an external source affecting the growth of this technology. And the predictions were for 20 through 2022 that there'd be big drops in the shipments of these products because factories wouldn't be working, and big drops in installations because people would not be demanding these and the workforce wouldn't be there to do this. Well, it turned out, okay, that the numbers started to come in for 2020, 2021, and 2022. Now I'll say a little bit about, and we were wrong on this whole thing. All the predictors, okay, were too pessimistic. And in fact, photovoltaic shipments grew from about 123 gigawatts in that single year when COVID really kind of started, to about 131, 132 gigawatts in a single year of product being shipped into the markets, okay, in 2020. And if we remember that what we look at here is we can only tell what happened the year before. So only now are the numbers coming out for this year. And at Nrel, we have also always used the data provided by Paula Mintz, who has been counting solar cells for a good part of her life on this whole thing, is very careful about double and triple counting. And let me give you an example, because my time in India has shown me that, for instance, you may have a solar in China, and it may be shipped to Taiwan, okay, for entering the marketplace somehow. And that solar cell may be purchased by India. Well, India makes it into a module. It produces the power. It counts it as part of the watts being produced. Taiwan counts it as part of its watts being produced, and China may count it as parts of its watts. So you might be triple counting what's actually out there. And Paula Mintz has been very careful about getting these numbers correct so that you don't double and triple count. And this representation probably is fairly close. And these are shipments year into the market. Remember that in 1958, we produced about 50 watts of photovoltaics worldwide. And now in a single year, we shipped 130 gigawatts of photovoltaics into the world markets. Well, it turned out, as I said, we were wrong, that these things started to go up, and Paula herself had redefined her estimates. And for instance, if we look at where we're in 2021, she said optimistically, hey, we should be able to get more than 160 gigawatts into the markets. Okay, it looks like the growth is there. Well, it turns out that's wrong. And coming out now, it looks like the 2021 shipments into the market is somewhere at greater than 190 gigawatts on this. And so that the world markets have picked up mainly because of demand. A lot of it, as you know, you're living it going into India, but also the United States, China, and other places are also very, very big markets now for this technology. This technology is real, but students working on your degrees, looking for your careers, it's not there. We need a lot of work yet in order to bring it up to where the expectations now are for this tech. We look at, that was a single year by year. If we look at what is cumulatively installed, and this goes to 2020, there were about 3/4 of a terawatt, 750 gigawatts cumulatively being installed and being used to produce electricity worldwide on this whole thing. And now with what is coming in there, many people keep these figures. This figure is from REN 21. I think it's a good source to look with. And so I think in 2022, we certainly will have a terawatt of photovoltaics installed in the world. And this is thanks to these huge, huge programs. These programs starting up even here in Brazil, and the existing programs in the U.S. and Europe and China. And also we have to say, even for Professor Darwish out there, he knows that even the place that said, how could we ever have photovoltaics? The UK has a huge investment in this technology as well. So, well, this is the good news, but there is bad news. We have new worries with the war in the Ukraine, how that's going to affect things, because of this has jostled the world political situation with Russia, which affects China. And as we're going to see, that's where the photovoltaic on this for the world. And also, despite all this stuff going in, we're not keeping up with our efforts, okay, in order to not destroy our planet. So that this great growth in clean energy, okay, is still not enough in order to combat some of the things on climate change. If we look at the emissions around the world, okay, there's some things here that we should not be proud of. You can see that China and the US in 2020 were the largest greenhouse gas emitters on this. We hope things are changing, and even looking at a cumulative emission, it's terrible on this whole thing. Something has to be done, and we hope that with the current administrations that it is happening. And even on a per capita thing, that the United States is certainly ahead of China. So the warning is here that unless we do something with these renewables, including photovoltaics, okay, our pathway to the future is still uncertain as far as our global climate conditions. So what can we do? Is there any more need for innovation in photovoltaics? And the questions are always asked. Well, since this is here already, aren't we there already? Do we need any more get money and buy more photovoltaics? But the business as usual platform is not sufficient, okay, for this clean energy future, 100% renewable energy future, or maybe even 100% solar electricity future on this that might be needed. I always like to look back. I don't think that on this thing and look at innovation and visionaries. Okay, this is certainly Edison. Okay, along with the person who's responsible for developing AC machines, sitting back there at General Electric, GE, back in the 1900s, early 1900s. And at this time, Edison had said, I put in solar energy. What a source of power. He said this in 1903. He was certainly an innovator, brought us all these inventions, but he was also a visionary on what our future. And if they were working now, I don't know if you can see this, but they would have to be wearing masks in their laboratories like this. And what I'll try to do is that I design now face masks for people because of COVID. I'll try to get some of these to the university for you to get out to the students, that even though we have COVID, okay, our face masks can be still represented by the sun. Some people have forgotten what the second part said, is that I hope we don't have to wait until oil and coal run out before we tackle that. Okay, I think that Professor Vera made reference to this certainly in her introduction on this whole thing, and it's true. And things are changing, and that's the good news. Maybe not changing fast enough, but they are changing. If I look at Colorado in the US, where I come from, we've now replaced our 3 coal power units in Colorado with renewables, wind mainly, but also solar. Chernobyl, okay, unfortunately is a problem right now, but it started to invest in photovoltaics as well, and started with the first 1 megawatt site. All these things on coal in the United States, the coal mines are closing because there's no market, not because of the renewables coming up, but if you look at natural gas, okay, it's cleaner and it's cheaper than coal. Coal is just very, very expensive as an energy source. If you look at these costs continue to come down, if you look at the prices for US dollars per kilowatt hour, you can see here, photovoltaics has now become cheaper even than wind. So among the renewables, photovoltaics has dropped precipitously, and we'll give some indications why this happens, and is many other sources. And quite frankly, now it's cheaper than coal, and it certainly is cheaper than nuclear, as is wind, okay, on the same scale. And in the US, okay, for the first time in 2019, wind and solar for producing electricity surpassed hydroelectric. And this was something that was said would never happen, okay, but happened much more rapidly than we had thought. Well, you know, many countries have all these programs, okay, but look to India. Okay, India has programs in renewables and in photovoltaics, okay, with targets, okay, are the targets that other parts of the world should mimic. These are truly stretch targets maybe, but boy, if we don't have targets like this, we're not going to make an indentation into what we're doing with emissions that are causing these problems for us on this, or the availability of electricity to so many people who are under electrified is what I call it now. In fact, part of my program here in Brazil is looking at bringing electricity to the poor people in who are living in these conditions that just don't have it. And it's a source now that's cheap, inexpensive, but still needs development in the. So let me see where I'm going here. Okay, so where are we now? Okay, we showed you this. It's being produced, it's being used, it's being bought, being purchased, careers are being developed, okay, businesses are being developed on this whole thing. And let me just stop here, because I don't think we should lose one thing in here, and that is that India in the early days, in the 1970s and 1980s, were the true pioneers in photovoltaics worldwide. You know, in this last year, okay, we lost two very, very important pioneers for photovoltaics, Dr. Barua, okay, from Calcutta, and Chopra, okay, who was from Delhi, both of whom I had the privilege to meet, and both of whom had made huge contributions on different sides, one from the photovoltaic development side and understanding the technology and understanding what it could be. That'd be Professor Barua, and then Professor Chopra, who did so much on being able to understand the physics and what directions the physics. I understand both of them were taken from us because of COVID, and it's such a loss on this whole thing to have these. And I dedicate this lecture certainly to them on this whole thing. The other person who is still here is a photovoltaic pioneer, thermal side, and that is a good friend, Professor Garg, who I'm sure people there know on this. I think that that Professor Datta was Professor Garg's student, and Professor Garg here is still active, still providing directions for us in solar energy. I think it spans this whole thing that you have to realize that a lot of the science and technology had come out of early days and what India had done also for us in this technology. Well, where is it coming from? If we look at 2019, you can look at this and you can see it was mainly being shipped from China. This is the PV shipped into the markets. And if we take this further into 2020, larger portion from China, but even look at more of this, it's China, Malaysia, Vietnam, South Korea, Thailand, Taiwan, Japan, Singapore, and India. These are all Asian countries. So our photovoltaics are originating in Asia on this. And that's 2020 figures, not the 2021. 2021, I think what we would see is that the US has gone down, Europe has gone down, and Asia in general has gone up on these shipments. We look at the manufacturers on this, and this is 2021 manufacturers from last year. These are the top 10. You can see China, 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 and then you an organization here, okay, which really makes most of its product in Vietnam and in Malaysia, although it is a US owned company and has about a gigawatt of manufacturing now in the US itself on this. And so all these places, okay, you can see are tied very, very much with Asia, but certainly you see that about 85 to 90%, okay, of the companies that are making photovoltaics worldwide are China owned. India now, but very interesting, is starting to change this because they're making these investments and they're making these policy changes to bring up in India. And I think we're going to start to see big changes because of what India is doing. Okay, looking at this, you know, I think that very soon there are huge tariffs, that are 25% tariffs that are going into product being shipped into India, which is going to make the product we made in India less expensive to make it into the markets. Where is it all going? If you look at 2011, believe it or not, almost all of it was going to Germany. Okay, on this, that we only had about 23 gigawatts. Right now, that's about the size of a pretty good factory, okay, in the world. About, I don't know, 80% of it was going in. Look at the solar resource of Germany at the time, and even now, was about the same as Anchorage, Alaska in the United States. And if it's good enough for Germany and it's good enough for that, it has to be good enough for the United States. And we're seeing that now. And certainly India has recognized this, that their solar resource, your solar resource, is just outstanding, okay, to support this product. Well, if we look at who's using it, okay, in the top 10 countries in 2019, it was China, US, and India. On this were the where most of the PV installations in 2019 took place. Okay, at the cumulative installations, it's China, US, and Japan, Germany, but India also creeping up in this. And in 2021, when we see this, we're going to see India has crept up probably into third place on this thing. And on the production side, certainly, I'm sorry, on the installed side in a single year, surpassing the United States. Here's the annual capacity expansion. This is from IRENA, from their website on this whole thing. And if we look here, and this is in 2019, okay, what the annual power capacities were on the cumulative side. 20, you can see the ranking here was cumulatively was China, India, South Korea. So in fact, still the US was second, but you can see that India is coming up, and I think India certainly will be third, or maybe close to what the US is in 2021, and certainly surpassing it in 2022. Selling prices for this on this is that you can buy modules in the United States, okay, for about 50 cents a watt, 50 cents a watt. You buy two modules, you buy 2 watts for $1, okay. This really has brought down prices on this whole thing, and we can ask the questions. There are some worries though. The feedstock, okay, for silicon has been going up. You know, about a year ago, we paid $8 to $10 a kilogram for silicon, and now it's up to about $38 a kilogram. I talked to an installer about 4 or 5 days ago here in Brazil, and he was getting ready to put in a site that was going to be about 20 megawatts, 30 megawatts of floating PV. And he had gotten a quote on it about a year ago or 10 months ago, ready to buy. They issued him a new quote, and it was 15% higher, mainly because this price of feedstock, but also a little bit about the worries about the markets, believe it or not, still remaining to COVID because of the shutdowns now that have just occurred recently in China, that the places that are making this in many places in China are closed down because trying to shut down this new wave of COVID that they're having. So you look at prices over the years, I always like this. When I started at Nrel, as Guri said, in 1977, on this, photovoltaics was about $77 a watt in 2021 dollars, that's about $350 a watt that you would pay for photovoltaics. Now it's down to an average price worldwide of about 35 cents a watt for this. This is an incredible drop in the price, okay, of a photovoltaic module. And if you see what happens in this with the evolution of this, is that China entered the markets in about 2010 to 2011 on manufacturing. This was kind of the tipping point for photovoltaics on this. And as we went along here, okay, entering the 50 cents a watt type of thing here, the US started us all maybe on R&D, okay. On the big market side, Japan showed us how to manufacture it during the early 1990s. Germany came in and showed policy and how we can use policy to include consumer use of this technology. And finally, China showed us how to scale up. And in fact, here was the China syndrome in the US. And what I say to people is that we really have to thank China for showing us how finally to scale up and decrease prices for us. What I'm going to do here, since I see it's already a little late, I want to skip over this. And as I said, I'm going to give you a copy and go into a little bit more here on the technologies on this, because I think it's a mistake not to recognize that that technology has been evolving and will continue to need this evolution that really depends so much on physics, okay, and understanding of physics and the expansion of physics. And talk about materials and device technologies. I hope this is okay during this last 7 to 8 minutes. I hope I can make it through. This is what the PV shipments have looked like through 2020. They look about the same now. It's mostly silicon. And the market is based on silicon, the same thing that's powering my computer right now. And it's just dominated by silicon technologies. And if you look at the manufacturers in India right now, it's silicon on this, and has been silicon. And if you look at the efficiencies, this is the Nrel efficiency chart, which I must say that I came up with in 1984, 1985, and it has been going on ever since. It's become more complex and a lot more technologies on this whole thing. And people sometimes ask, oh, and there's also one now on modules if you want to look at it. But if you look at this, that people say, oh, look at this whole thing. Don't we have enough materials? So on. The answer to most of these things is no. We need innovation in materials and in device concepts to meet the needs in the future. We need more watts per meter squared, and we need it still can use a decrease in the efficiency. If you look at what's happened, it's mainly been silicon, crystalline silicon, and the two very highest efficiencies have been silicon heterojunctions and these interdigitated back contact cells, much different technologies. The Sanyo came up with this heterojunction concept where they put a thin layer of amorphous silicon on top of a silicon wafer. And this above 26% from a solar cell in the laboratory here. If you look up here, about 25, 26, 27% on this whole thing. And the big part of this is that it makes use of the properties of the amorphous silicon for temperature. So it works better at higher temperatures, but uses the silicon with better performance and with longer lifetime. Many people now have purchased this process and everything. The interdigitated back contact cell, which is now coming into other technologies, does something very simple. It takes all the contacts and puts them on the back of the cell, so no light is obscured from the front. It's very interesting that this seems simple, but the physics involved took years and years to involve to be able to make this correctly, so that you can now have cells that are up above 26%, but even more than that. You have commercial modules you can buy at the 23, 24% level from both of these technologies. About a quarter of the sun's power coming down onto this photovoltaic module is converted into useful electricity. By the way, I'm going to go quick through this, is that we always find out that there's nothing new. I talked about these back contact of these interdigitated solar cells. Hey, that from Bell Labs was a back contact solar cell on this. The solar cells I showed you going, in fact, that's a picture from that video. All the contacts were on the back. They recognized that this obscuration of light from the front that we see with the fingers was something that was taking away from their efficiencies. And even the silicon solar cells used in the space thing for the first Vanguard, okay, were also back contact solar cells. If you look at cut solar cells that we see here now, what people do is they cut the solar cells. They take a solar cell that's 16 millimeters by 16 centimeters by 16 centimeters, and they cut it into half or cut it into thirds. They can increase the efficiency. But in fact, the first Vanguard cells, okay, used in that satellite did the very, very same thing for the very, very same purpose. Shingled solar cells. If you see modules now, they're talking about taking the back of the one solar cell here and putting it onto the front, just on the edge of the next solar cell, shingle these like a roof on the whole thing to increase the efficiency. There's no space between the solar cells. And in fact, if we look back, that Peter Iles at Hoffman Electronics actually patented this thing back in 1958. Okay, was the concept. So many of these things we see are not there. New encapsulant about all these new polymers, but in fact, many of these were used in original things. And the one I like now is something that's very, very big in India, and that is Agri-Voltaics. That is that, you know, for a long time, people said, oh, photovoltaics, it's bad because we eat up our land. And this land we need to produce food. What we're finding out now is that, in fact, many crops love to flourish under photovoltaic arrays out in the fields. Many things like tomatoes and other things actually do much better by this. And you can use the power by photovoltaics produced to feed into the grid, or you can use it to for water pumping at the site. That's something that is very, very necessary, or even to provide power for greenhouses. But what I like too is that this was not new. And in fact, if you look back in the into the early 1980s, that Adolf Gertzberger at Fraunhofer proposed doing this back then. He was a man ahead of his time on this whole thing. But in fact, now we see this all over the world, that now agri-voltaics, okay, certainly in India, certainly in China, and certainly now in Brazil, in the US, okay, is becoming a mainstream of the technology technology use. Well, let me more quickly on this and talk a little bit about technology. Right now, okay, the technology of choice now is this silicon solar cell. It's called a PERC solar cell, a passivated emitter and passivated rear contact solar cell. They did do this to do this passivation so that you don't lose those positive and negative carriers that you create, okay, that are needed for the efficiency. So you don't lose them during the process of conversion. So the back surface of the solar cell is better passivated. The front surface is better passivated. And so you don't lose these electrons and these positive carriers called holes at these two interfaces. This looks complex. It's still very, very simple. And if you look at these 190 gigawatts that were shipped last year, most of these were these PERC solar cells on this. And in fact, if you look at the 2019 capacity on this of the 145 gigawatts, it looks to me like about 75% of these were PERC cells. And on this, and world records, okay, on this whole thing. And if we look at this is 2020 on this, it breaks it down a little bit more, showing the CAD tells some of the thin film technology still on there. You can see that about 7% of what was out there was PERC on this whole thing. But technology advances, and something is coming up here called the TOPCon cell. And if you see on this record, it's about 5% of this. This is a technology that's grown out of Europe, okay, on this whole thing. It's still a simple technology that looks very, very much like PERC, okay, but it's starting to replace it. So here's that same 2020 shipments, this 131 gigawatts. And here's what it looked like this last year in 2021 from the data that's come out, is that you can see that TOPCon now is starting to take over a little bit of the other thing that I am struck by is also the silicon heterojunction here is also growing on this. This is that solar cell that has amorphous silicon on top of a crystalline silicon network that the TOPCon in this. And in fact, what the trends are for these new technologies are, the trend is toward PERC, has been, still there, but that now has gone, and also on the silicon side, toward the use of single crystal, monocrystalline silicon, not so much multicrystalline or polycrystalline silicon anymore. And the trend is toward now the TOPCon cell. So you can things changing, and the TOPCon one is an example of where things have in this whole thing. And this is the TOPCon cell. You can compare it to what it looks like for the PERC technology. They look very, very much the same with a little bit change in the structure. They were able to be able to adjust the physics a little bit to get in. And basically was with the same sort of manufacturing, you get about a plus 1% gain in the efficiency. This means if your cell was 25%, it is now 26% without doing anything to your manufacturing line. And that's why people are going to this, because, hey, efficiency is king in the photovoltaic world. That efficiency of a module by 1%, you cut the cost of the installation by about 2 to 3% on this thing. So it affects the economics of the whole system that you're putting in. Well, there are a lot of things in here. This is one look at this, that a lot of people think that everything is silicon, but there are a lot of other technologies out there. And I'm just going to show this chart on this thing and point out that there are some commercial technologies. Cad telluride is a thin film cad telluride, a lot being installed in India, still is a big part of and growing part of the world markets. But there are a lot of other things in here as well. Takes is starting to grow up a little bit, but more than that, let me end this by talking about these Perovskite solar cells, because everybody in the world, every research university laboratory is working on these. So let me see how I escape, that I can go forward here. On this, and just say that the complexity of what we've been doing has been increasing over these last 50 years. We started off with silicon, we went to ternaries and multinaries, looking at this in our photovoltaic material space, and now we're looking at hybrid, inorganic, organic materials, okay, that have the promise of even higher efficiencies. Not only the promise, I have to say, but the demonstration that these things can be up into the 20%, 20, maybe 30% range for photovoltaics now on this. So let's look at this perovskite technology. And if you look at this thing and follow-ups on this whole thing, you can see that since about 2013, these things were introduced and now have reached ranges of, for single junction perovskites, that are about 25%, but more these tandems that they grow the perovskites on top of silicon, with these things have reached nearly 30%, okay, on research cells on this whole thing. So this is why a lot of the interest is turning this. You're getting very, very high efficiencies, either from single junction devices, but even for tandems, whether it's on silicon or some other materials, to get things that are nearly 30% efficient on this. So here is the 30% efficiencies on the silicon tandem, just recently announced within the last 6 months or so on this. And this material looks like this. It's a hybrid organic, inorganic thing. The organics now with lead, okay, with some tied up with some other materials, and the organic stuff surrounds this whole thing. And of course, there are some concerns with this. With this, it's a complex material, but has all the stuff you want. It's a direct band gap semiconductor, which means you can make it very thin layers out of it to absorb the sun's energy. On this, it has absorption coefficients that are the same as the best that we have for solar cells. it has some problems. Every technology has problems. I don't care what it is, whether it's a renewables, there are also some limitations. I don't care if you talk about silicon, if you talk about perovskites. One thing is, but quite frankly, this is not just lead. It's lead held in this perovskite, hybrid perovskite, so it's more stable. The second thing is, quite frankly, there's very little lead in this very, very thin layer. Manufacturability, we're starting to see that it's not such an issue anymore. The remaining issue is still stability, as it is for every solar cell out there. You have a crystalline silicon module out there, you have light-induced degradation that you see. That during the first, for instance, if you look at the warranty from the people who make these, in the first 2 years, they built in the fact that the degradation is their warranty, long-term warranty, that usually about 0.5% a year. During the first year, it might be 1 to 1.5% during that first year because of light-induced effects. Every technology has this, but it stabilizes. So let's see here. Let me show these things. Is what the point out that there are many shades of stability, the contacts, the interfaces, the material itself, and these are all being investigated. Okay, very, very carefully on this. It's more to worry about for other applications right now than it is for PV, but realize that these have not been solved yet. It's a great material demonstrations of efficiencies, but still a lot of work that we have to do about this to make it a large-scale commercial product. The records, okay, here are up at, as I said, 29.8% for a tandem, putting the perovskite on top of the silicon, shown here in this diagram. Even single perovskites have been, tandems have shown efficiencies above 23% on this. Oh, and perovskites with CIGS, okay, at above 24% in the tandem thing. So there's a lot of hope on this whole thing. And I didn't say anything here about bifacial modules. Bifacial modules are solar cells that collect the energy from both sides. So you have the front side of the solar cell that works normally. On the back side, you build another solar cell that you can actually reflect the light from the surface on the back surface into the solar cell and gain efficiencies on this. Every manufacturer now is making bifacial modules, and the reason is it's just as cheap to make a bifacial module as it is to make a conventional monofacial module on this. But now they're making these using perovskites, at least in the laboratory, as part of our future look on PV. Realizing that from the laboratory to commercialization, you have to do a lot to these technologies. There's a lot that has to be done in order to prove that it is viable for us as consumers. We cannot let the consumer have a product that goes out there and after 3 years, 5 years fails on this. We have to guarantee that it has quality when it's installed, and it has a lifetime of 25 years, 30 years. And I see now some people are warranting their photovoltaic modules for 40 years, 40-year warranties, okay, on this product being installed into our energy system. I'll show this kind of a religious type basis. When I first came to Nrel, which was Syria in 1977, this cartoon was hanging up on the bulletin board. And it has Moses standing up there with the tablets, looking up toward the sky and saying something. And he's saying what all of us researchers, whether it's Dr. Bera, Dr. Joshi, Dr. Gupta, okay, Dr. Singh, or anybody out there always says, looks up there and he's saying, oops, I put it in Portuguese, saying, but what about funding on this? And in fact, the investment for all of us, whether we're researchers, whether you're students, stocks, faculty, whatever it is, the commitment of funding is huge in order to realize these technology. So realize that it's not only the commitment of the individuals, but it's a commitment of our governments to be able to carry out this research. This whole thing on innovation is tied up, okay, energy and technology on this. And the message is that the driving force for technology continues to be innovation if we're going to meet this clean energy revolution. And the future is here. Certainly now this technology is real. Okay, we can use it in many, many applications, but it's not over. And the path forward, a priority for you out there as young researchers. And this includes Dr. Bera, who's, I can see all you people are in this category of young researchers, that you are the future for bringing this about. And maybe some of us, okay, more established researchers, although in my work here in Brazil, I'm seeing one very, very big thing that maybe for me going out in the field and doing these measurements and carrying around modules and taking off of structures, it would probably be a lot easier for me maybe 25 years ago than it is now on this whole thing. So get going now and make our future, okay, safe and future real in these renewable technologies. So let me end it here is that, you know, I gave a little bit about history. People have said the only thing about the future you couldn't predict was the history you didn't know. We have to learn from what was done positively in the past with these technologies, but we also have to learn from what was done incorrectly so that we cannot make the same mistakes. And secondly, for you out there especially, it's easier to grasp the future if you know what it should look like and you know what you would like your future, what your children, what your grandchildren should have as part of this planet. And finally, the best way to protect the future is through are the ones that are going to be able to create it and create it through innovation. Hey, thank you for your patience. I took too much time, probably. I can answer questions. I'm going to give a copy of this to send it to Dr. Bera, certainly, and she is free to hand it out to anyone. And you can fill in those gaps that I kind of skipped over. So thank you. Hello?
Yes, sir.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, sir, for such a wonderful talk. And you have explained everything in such a simple manner that we are like speechless. You are really great, sir.
As Dr. Guri will tell you that on the other side, I am never speechless. That I think you have to commitment to these technologies. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing there. Is one that that I hope a lot of the students out there, and you know, especially we have to look at on this is especially in your part of the world, in India, in the Middle East. This is where the huge growth and huge future is going to be, and realize that a career in this part is something that is not only going to be rewarding personally as far as making a living, but is also going to be rewarding for all of us, okay, who live on this planet, that you make contributions to making life better.
Yes, sir. No session is said to be complete without clearing why, when, what, and how. Because asking questions is the first way to begin change. Just because something is tough or difficult, it doesn't mean that it is impossible. The challenge is what makes something wonderful when you finally overcome your obstacles. The sense of success that comes when working hard over time is much better than achieving a simple task. Don't be afraid of a challenge when it can make you a better person in the end. These lines truly proves by yourself. So, student, do you have any questions?
I see.
Yeah.
I do see some questions up here
Yeah.
on the,
One
and I
question.
could answer.
I,
I can answer these very quickly. First question, what is the efficiency of a current solar panels? I know this very well because I was just out in the field validating that these are, so that you can get photovoltaic modules now above 20% efficiency at about converting 1/5 of the sun's power into electricity. Okay, for about the same, for about 50 cents or 40 cents a watt. So the efficiency is there, but boy, if we can have 30% or 40% efficiency at those prices or lower prices, that would be great. And these solar cells, in fact, I do talk about what wavelengths they have and everything. And in fact, I think probably what you're getting at is that tandem solar cell I showed with the Perovskite makes better use of the solar spectrum. It uses part of it from silicon, okay, from the Perovskite, which is the higher band gap. So you get that as well.
Okay. In the same question, he has asked, sir, how much carbon do we release in right now for making them, and how much do we reduce the emission of carbon?
Yes, it's the old nuclear scientist thing is, aren't you creating a lot of this stuff by manufacture of making a lot of releasing a lot of carbon dioxide and maybe defeating what you're trying to do? And the answer is yes and no. We have to pay attention to this. I think that whoever asked this question, it's a valid question and one that we have to worry about. So we could create the electricity by other means. For instance, most of the silicon in the world now is made by hydro, okay, by a renewable source. But there still are power plants, okay, around the world that are getting their electricity. I mean, not power plants, but silicon, but PV plants that are getting their electricity from coal. And we can't do this. The one look forward is to think about doing this is to have a solar breeder, is to use those solar cells you make to power your factory. But I think what you bring in is a great thing into making them. Recycling now, they call this they call this the circular economy. It is the biggest thing worldwide now on working on things to be able to recycle, to be able to reuse these things. And once again, you make a very good point. If we don't do this, we're just defeating everything we want to do to make a clean energy economy in the future. So it is a big concern, and you can read a lot about this. And finally, the last thing is that I just want to ensure you know that when you make these solar cells, you use a lot of energy. And I want to tell you that it takes the energy payback is less than a year for a solar on a rooftop. Okay, that's including all the structures, the steel, the inverters, the electronics, and everything. And for a thin film solar cell, about half that. So you get the energy back very quickly. Whoever asked that question, I think that make a very good, if that's a student, I think that would make a very good PhD student. If it's a faculty member, this faculty member is right on, and you should give that faculty member a raise.
Yeah, thank you, sir. Next, can we make the solar cell in shape of concave mirror, point to another cell to increase the percentage of solar cell absorption?
Yeah,
and,
this is
in order to increase the power density.
Yeah. So, you know, a look at solar technology has been, should we use concentrators, a little different than that is maybe to put the solar cell at the focal point of that paraboloid, or put it at a focal point of a lens. And you can operate a small solar cell, okay, with a concentration of 1,000 times. The economy just has not been there yet. And so concentrating photovoltaics has not been able to compete with normal photovoltaics, or you have your photovoltaics like the ones there, okay, facing that's a installation in the US facing south at that angle of about that's up in Colorado, so it's at a fairly high angle. Hey, or certainly you'll never beat single axis tracking. Everywhere you see now for large installations, they have a single axis tracking. So your photovoltaics, okay, are tracking from early morning in the east to the west at night on the whole thing, and to beat that, but concentrators still aren't there on this. Although the solar cells that they look at for the concentrators are the ones that they use in space on this, because they're very high efficient. Space people have a lot of money, and they want a lot of power in a small area, so they can invest in this very high efficiency, ultra high efficiency, but very expensive technology. But even the solar cells in space are not concentrators. They're solar cells that operate at about 30 to 32% efficiency in outer space. Okay, they're triple junctions. The better use, as the first question had, the solar spectrum. But as concentrators, people are still working on this, but we're not there yet.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next is, by installing a large solar power plant in the area, how much surface window do we increase for local area, and what are the effects of it on wildlife, environment, global warming? Means they are worried about the environmental problems even.
Oh, good question. So I hope I gave it one answer. Is one worry is about food. Okay, and I think that the agri-voltaics coming about now is showing that food and photovoltaics can live together. The question about the albedo on this is also something very interesting, because it has two meanings for me. One is that, are we losing this amount of energy that's being reflected back? It's so no problem there. The albedo is an interesting thing, because with bifacial cells, this amount reflected off the earth, okay, can be used. And so there's a lot of work being done on using that albedo in order to produce power for these bifacial technologies. Yeah, I think these questions relating to the environment and to pollution and to everything else are now the highest concerns for all these clean energy technologies. Okay, it doesn't matter whether it's photovoltaics, whether it's solar thermal power, or whether it's even nuclear on this whole thing, is that you want to ensure that you're not bringing about a technology that is be doing by a conventional technology. If you are, okay.
Okay, thank you, sir.
It's not very good.
Yeah. So next, I think one student is saying, I think power sources like nuclear energy, fusion right now, fission in future is better for future, because don't require as much land as solar panel. And the fission reactors in future may be, maybe better. Fusion reaction in future may not even produce radioactive waste. They may just produce helium. Sir, what do you think about it?
Yes. So now I have to put on two hats. You have to realize that back in the early 2000s, I was a huge advocate for nuclear power. Along with working, I was heading the National Center for Photovoltaics, but I said, hey, listen, we nuclear power is clean energy. And if we're going to get there, we have to look at this thing. And I remember I gave a talk at a very conservative organization, the National Enterprise, American Enterprise Institute, that is are very far out conservative people. And I gave this talk, and first of all, very impressed that I was positive about nuclear. But my message was that, you know, I'm not worried. I think eventually, at that time, 2004, 2005, I said photovoltaics, I think, will win out over nuclear for one very big thing. I said it's going to be cheaper. And I said, and it's going to be cheaper from the use of land, from everything else on the whole thing. I said, the one thing that we have to combat is that we can't do it 24 hours a day. And in my presentation that I skipped, I make a big thing about what's happening with storage. It's storage plus photovoltaics. It's storage plus wind, okay, that is big. So looking at the nuclear, I think photovoltaics now, as is wind, are both less expensive than nuclear. And also, it takes less time to put in the photovoltaics. If you put in a nuclear plant in the US now, it would take 15 minutes. 15 years before it's operational. That plant might be 4 megawatts on this whole 4 gigawatts. It take 15 years, and during that time, you can be producing a lot more power. So, and the last part is I'm still I like fission, okay, on this, and I think that's a good part of this question. Can that come out? It needs innovation. Without that innovation, we would not be. I'm sorry. Is that fission or fusion I'm talking about on this whole thing? If we don't be able to do that, okay, I think we have to get rid of the nuclear waste. And lastly, I'm going to call out one thing to you. We're having a war now in the Ukraine. And in the Ukraine, there's something like 17 nuclear reactors that are in danger. And we have one nuclear reactor there that had a problem at Chernobyl. That now we're finding out that the troops there, okay, had been living in this radioactive dust that was there and didn't know it, and now are affected by it. So we still, not only in times of peace, but what happens when you have a concentrated source of power like that is taken over, okay, the dangers, yes, but also the cutting off of power. Dr. Herman Scheer, who was the great person on doing feed-in tariffs in the parliament in Germany, told me one time, I says, you know, I think producing this power out of the Sahara and everything is great. And he pointed his finger at me and says, Kasmersky, you're wrong. He says, if we do that, we're going to leave the same people in charge of that power who are doing the oil. It's only the big companies that are going to do it. Has to be more distributed. So I'm as much favorable about nuclear if we develop the technology correctly, but I'm not afraid of the competition with the renewables.
एक ना अपनी इसमें वो है अजय सर हैं उनका सर sorry sir, last question. Recently China made an artificial sun 5x more than our sun. Can we increase efficiency of solar cell by artificial sun like that in future, or that sun fulfill our energy need in future?
Yeah, certainly. And if you can do this safely on this, this might be the answer for having solar concentrators. Not only solar photovoltaic concentrators, but solar thermal on this, if that is the case. So I don't know much about the technology. I do know, though, that the Chinese have also made big advances that we're not talking about, and that's the advances of creating the power in space. and then beaming it down to Earth, okay, by various means. This is something that is an old technology concept, but now is starting to look like the innovation has happened, so I think all these things have to look at. I like this idea of maybe having an artificial sun, but once again, I'm not very much up on how this is done exactly. I've only read some things in the popular press.
Okay, thank you, sir. So, since no more questions in the chat box, so I conclude this session by thanking you, sir, for nicely satisfying our students' queries. Now, I would like to request our Physics Society convener and respected faculty member, Physics Department, Dr. Pankaj Singh, sir, to give vote of thanks. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Ruchika. Am I audible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Ruchika. So thank you. I, Dr. Pankaj Singh, convener Physics Society, would like to take this opportunity to thanks our keynote speaker, Professor Lawrence L. Kasmersky, for sparing her time and enlightening us on the topic photovoltaic technology, history, status, and opportunity. Thank you very much, sir. I express my sincere thanks to our principal, Sir Professor Rajiv Agrawal, Vice Principal, Sir Professor Kamal Gupta, IQAC Coordinator, Dr. Aditya Saxena, our teacher in charge, Dr. Kakuli Bera, DBT Star College Coordinator, Dr. Indrakant Singh. Special thanks to all the faculty members of Deshbandhu College and other institute for joining us. Thanks is due to our young mind and student for making the event successful. Finally, I would like to thank technical team of Deshbandhu College. Thank you all. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, sir. The session can be closed now. My sincere gratitude to Professor Lawrence. My heartfelt appreciation to our faculty members and our students for joining this webinar. Okay, thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Namaste.
Namaste, sir. Namaste.